1950s, since the early 1950s, the education policy we had was quite shambolic in its nature. I'm not saying that this new education policy is amazing. I think it all comes down to the implementation of it, right? Firstly, let's just get into the details of it. Firstly, the ministry till now it was called the HRD ministry, which is going to be now called the Education Ministry. Minor problem. Now, also, I think for the higher education part of it, they are coming up with an option in which you can have a 4-year undergraduate course, and without doing a master's, you can start your research work. Usually, if you have to do any kind of research work, you had to do your masters before you could start your research. But now the government is giving an option where you can start your research if you do a 4-year undergraduate course. It is not compulsory, but you can do it. Another aspect of it is in making it more job friendly, in the sense many people, one of the major problems in the period where there was high unemployment was a person who was doing maybe his BA and MA and yet was coming out unemployed because he didn't have the required technical skills. Now you're pushing towards the technical skills part of it, and you can even have a major and a minor in a subject which is not at all related to your field. Like usually, if you went into engineer or something, your life would revolve around maths, physics, and chemistry, right? But now, along with these subjects, you can also choose a minor which would de-stress you, or something which you would enjoy, which is a good thing. One of my major concerns is theoretically it's fine, but it depends. Like till fifth standard, they're saying they will promote regional language, right? Now, regional language is very subjective. For minorities, it can be different, and especially in big cities like Mumbai or Delhi, regional languages you cannot define a regional language, right? So, what are we trying to say? Till fifth, there will be no English, or we will be speaking in Marathi. That is a little unclear. Like it's little weirdly put in the bill itself. It depends how they go about it. But English is a platform which needs to be a common ground for everyone to move ahead and have a job, right? Without English, I don't think so any of us would ever get a job. You need one language which will boost everyone's chances to get a job. I don't have much to say about apart from this on NEP.
All right, that was good. Uh, Moving ahead, Arnab wanted to speak. So, Arnab, yeah, you can go on.
Yeah. Hi, Karthik. Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, go on.
Okay. There are so many points to discuss in this NEP 2020. So I'm particularly selecting that point, that is the restructuring of that 10 plus 2 into 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 years. So I'm pointing out some points. So if you find I have misplaced any information, please counter me. So if I'm not wrong, there are 4 stages they will implement. The first one is foundational stage. So that will be, I think, around for 5 years, and then for preparatory stage, followed by middle stage and secondary stage. So one thing is clear that now government is focusing on that preschooling concept. So for any general government school, you cannot find that concept, that preschooling. For the kindergarten schools, where for the private schools we can find that, but until now there is no concept of preschooling. So that is a good thing. And for preparatory stage, that is, I think, for class 3 and 4, they will focus on playing, discovery, and activity based learning. That is, the interactive classrooms will be there. And I think for middle stage, they are going to have a rapid change, that is in experimental learning. So if I'm not wrong, there is around 10 days bagless schooling, where the students can interact with some vocational training. That is really a good thing, but unfortunately some of our politicians are twisting this fact as child labor, which is which is not acceptable at all. So we have to focus on that vocational training, because this is one of the uh, you know one baseline to grow our economic zone. And finally, that multidisciplinary study, they can select for class 9 to 12. They can select any subject regarding their own. Now, I have one concern, like suppose one student likes a science subject in class 9 or in class 10. If he or she go further with science and cannot go back beyond that, so I'm not sure whether they can select arts or commerce in their college life also. That is one thing, one concern that is not clear till now. So for me, the implementation part will be very crucial, and there are some advisory boards going to happen. They will look after that. So I'm sure this NEP 2020 is kind of revolution, and we must support that. That's all.
All right. Thank you so much, Arnab. Uh, f- Moving on, Anuj Tyagi has raised their hand. So please talk now.
Hi everyone. Okay, so there are a couple of things that I wish to say. The first reason why I would personally say that we should welcome the NEP 2020 is first the change in the investment. So government has seen and understood, realized how important the education sector is, and from 1.7 we have shifted to 6.6% of the GDP devoted for the education sector, which is quite a lot if you see it relatively. So one thing we need to appreciate is the government is realizing how much important the education sector is. Second is they are trying to reform the complete thing. So as Shlok and Arnav mentioned, yes, implementation is extremely crucial for this. But we need to applaud their sentiment. Like they try to do something different. We cannot always keep criticizing people like when some different reforms came in the picture, like say with the digitized. Yes, people criticize it. I understand why so, but we need to understand that at least there was someone who tried to do something better. We cannot get a home run on a very first strike. We need to keep trying again to get an eventual result. So let's consider this as a first step. Even if we are not able to get it clearly in the very first step, the educational policy, we can expect like at least in the long term, this would be very beneficial for the people. Like you don't have any particular, like Shlok mentioned, if you are going with engineering or PCM kind of thing, and you still wish to pursue music now, you need to go for some different specialization altogether for that. That's up to the student now. Whatever I wish, they can do that. At the same time, they are focusing on the vocational part of it as well. So there are so many things like carpentry, welding, very small things that help us as human in a day-to-day life. Like if something happens in my house and I need to do something, I have to call a particular technician for that. If I would have got a training for this, I could do the small task on everyday basis for my family, which is good. I'm not. So what I mean to say, education is not about just the technical background of it. What exactly have you learned on a professional basis? But what have you reformed yourself into? What has the educational system molded you into? So these small tasks are also very important for me. Now on the as Shlok mentioned about the language part. Now I'm not very sure. Maybe I did not read very well into it, but is there anywhere mentioned like only regional languages would be asked? If so, you can let me know. Because I think they would always have an option like in boards paper. If you see, you have a section with English. You also have a section with Hindi. So people, whatever language they're comfortable in, they can go ahead with it. So if they are promoting, say, the regional language, are they also promoting like they're promoting? Say, I'm in Karnataka, they are promoting Kannada. So along with Kannada, are they also giving an option for English and Hindi so that it is the student who can choose it rather than them forcing the language onto them? So that would be better maybe. If the government, if the education ministry itself gave them the option, like whatever you wish to pursue, you can go ahead with it. And these are very small things. The very important thing that I felt about this step was the investment part. How we decided to in six, because for a very keep thinking like education is not just about the sector we need to promote rather than the other stuff. So right now the government is trying to do that. Let's celebrate it and hope for the best. And as Arnab and Shlok already mentioned, implementation is question. That's all.
All right. Thank you so much, Anuj, for sharing your views. Abhishek would like to speak. So, Abhishek, you can go forward. Uh, Before Abhishek goes forward, let me add to the GD part. The question that was sent in the mail was also regarding how do we feel about the education policy, the new education policy? Do we feel that we have missed out, or do we feel we have gained due to this? If anybody wants to speak on that, once again raise their hands, and otherwise we'll move forward. But right now, Abhishek, please go forward.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Yeah, first of all, regarding this new education policy, it is something after 33 years we are having a new draft education policy. So it's obvious there would be reforms, and we also have a lot of cracks in our present education system where the talent of everyone is not identified. So it's a good thing in this NEP is that they are trying to give more importance to vocational education, which is already there, but not in a good way. But by overall analysis, what I felt is that this new educational policy would actually fail because it is having a lot of drawbacks, and I will try to say like 4 or 5 of them. First of all, this was actually released 2019 May, and within them, lots of public opinions have been sent to the central government, and they have not considered anything. The mere implementation of, not the implementation, the way they introduced this law is unconstitutional, because education comes under concurrent list. That is, it's not union list or state list. The state government and central government have a role in that, and it is not discussed or debated in the parliament as well. So this actually is a violation of the basic fundamental principle of constitution. It's against the federalism. Only one body actually unilaterally took this decision. And the second thing is about the language. Here, the hidden thing what many people point out is that there is a hidden agenda like this to impose Hindi, because until fifth standard, they promote their what's a native language. That's a good thing. We need to promote our native language. But when English is not given importance, English is the language. It's a technical language. That's one language that can give us fetch us a job. And in a multi-linguistic country like India, English is actually used as a language, but as Hindi is majority spoken language, and when English is not taught until 5, Hindi would actually come and replace the most of the native languages, like Hindi replaced Bihari, Haryanvi, etc. Just like Slok said, in multicultural metro cities like Mumbai, Bangalore, etc., where there are people from all kind of linguistic backgrounds, if in Maharashtra Marathi is taught, not everyone would be confirmed and will be comfort. Like if I am in Kerala, my parents got transferred to say Calcutta while I'm in third standard, then I cannot cope up with Bengali suddenly when I go over there. Then another thing is the promotion of Sanskrit. In India, there are oldest language is said to be Tamil, and there are many languages. So we don't give importance to any language. We promote almost all the native language, but none of the language is taken above, is seen above the other. And here already the Sanskrit is not going to fetch you any job. It's also a dead language. No one is speaking that. So here it's like they're trying to impose their culture over others. They say Sanskrit is a cultural language, but not everyone feel like that, especially the Dravidians. Being a Malayali, I don't feel Sanskrit has any use with that. So there is no particular use to, specify or promote Sanskrit in any way. And another thing is there is a dropout. There is a credit for dropout. Like they said it's 3 plus, no, 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 formula, which after like higher secondary, 4 years continuously you're in a degree. So there we can drop out even at first year, second year, third year. You don't need to complete the course, then still you're not a dropout. You'll get a credit until the year you have studied. You'll get certified for that as well. I think practically that's going to have a worse impact, because in any UG or any college, most of the people, like, this is actually the law of nature. Anywhere you will have a minority who is good in any aspect, a minority who is weak in any aspect, and most of the people would come in the average section. And 4-year course, after 2 years, people who are down the ladder in a class of 50, someone has to be the 50th rank, right? Such people would you know kind of drop out. If we don't really like to pursue that course, we should, but this, I think, is not the case. It's going to have a larger impact. Like, most of the people would take it for granted as they're getting credit, and they would not try to take any other effort. The main thing is about privatization, because one thing, the financial autonomy is given to this new thing, and that will make the college will have to, when UGC is scrapped, the University Grant Commission that grants funds to the universities, they will tell the colleges or the financial autonomy to make money your own way. So what it will lead to is, they will have to either increase the fees. Like the college from where I studied is having no fees. Or the poor section of the people who are, vast number of the population in our country is very poor. They will not be it will not be affordable for them to have education. And like, the government, or like Delhi University might be turned to Coca-Cola Delhi University. They will tell to tie up with a bank or with some other bodies, etc. So this is in education, health, etc. In certain such kind of things, I wish to have a very socialist approach, because, like, for example, if the corona vaccine is to be released, and if we say only the rich have to can buy, it will affect one health of one person is enough to affect the health of all person. Similar is the case with education, and I think the government and other, instead of privatizing it a lot, should try to fund and improve the education with in par with the private education, so that the people feel that the government institution are in a good level and choose those institutions. And like in Kerala, I think most of the people are now turning to the government school because they've improved the condition, comparable to that of the private itself, at a very affordable fees. And the another thing is this: when UGC is scrapped, and another higher education, uh, 1 minute, let me look at its name. It is something, Higher Education Grants Commission is formed. The board of its members, like 14 members in the board, like 7 or 8 of them are, industrialists and bureaucrats. What do these bureaucrats and industrialists have to do in a sector of education, when the teachers, the professors, their independence has, their freedom to have the subject autonomy is lost, and the whole power is given to one body, so they can, uh, shape the syllabus according to them. They can, impose their agenda. They can saffronize the education. Like, in a decentralized system, giving power to just one institution by scrapping all other things, I think is also not a good thing. So these all things are there in this new educational policy, where, so I believe it's like most of the bad things have actually come in a good covering, so that everyone would actually, like this 5 plus 3 plus 3 vocational education, after a long time we are having a revolutionary change. They would actually believe, yeah, it's very good, but they're also not understanding all these aspects. The main aspect I would stress on is this privatization. So I actually don't agree with this new educational policy.
All right. Thank you so much, Abhishek, for sharing your views. Toshif has raised his hand. So, Toshif, please go forward. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Great points, everyone. Especially the last one, Abhishek, which was talking. I really agree to many of his points. That although what my views are was that I had read an answer on Quora. It was a question that which is a brilliant mind, the one entering the IIT or the one entering the MIT. So there was one really great answer to that. It was by some educationist. He had written is that while entering the IIT, it's the Indian mind that is more intelligent, but while coming out of MIT, it's the MIT mind which is more intelligent. And there was a very deep meaning into it. The meaning was that the higher education system, there is something lacking in India, because up till school it's good, we are entering into IIT and every one of us believe that the minds entering the IIT, they are brilliant. But there is something in the undergraduate studies, or I don't know, but which causes so much of unemployment. All of the recruiters, they are complaining that we are not getting skilled laborers, we are not getting skilled ones. So I guess the gap which lies is in the higher education and not in the school education. So they hadn't needed to work on the school education, but to the higher education. Maybe after 10th, they could have come up with something which, enhances the skill of the student. Because up till school, I guess the system which we all went through is, for me, it looks good. To back up my point, I guess the teaching system in which we had three different languages, I guess that is not a very common thing in the whole of the world. In India, we used to learn three different languages right from our primary section. It was English, Hindi, and one of the regional language. So I guess that is very good, because in the world, if you talk to some bureaucrats, if you talk to some higher industrialists, they all say that one needs to be multilingual or at least bilingual. In the developed countries, it is only the system, it is monolingual. Like in USA, UK, they only teach you English and no other language. So regarding the language part, the new NEP policy, they are more focusing on regional languages of India. And according to me, they should have focused more on the global languages like English, like it's French, Chinese, Japanese. They should have focused more on that, because the regional language, like I have my mother tongue, so I am already learning it in my home. If there are South Indians, they are only already learning their mother tongue at their home. They don't need to learn it separately in the school. But those global languages, which you can stand apart in the globe, you can talk, you can communicate with every other people in the world in their own language, and that surely makes a different impact when you talk in their own language and not in other foreign language. So that could have revolutionized our education, especially our higher education. So that's what I believe, that they should have focused on that global language more and not on the regional language. And so, regarding school, I guess that was a proper thing which we all were following. It was good. The minds were really sharp. Even today, the Indian minds, they are told that they are the most versatile, they are the most flourished minds in the world. So I guess that was due to this all things, the maths we had, the science we had. We used to learn so deep and so advanced maths right from our primary. Although the major demerit was the information was not up to date, but the amount of teaching, the amount of knowledge we used to get in each of the subjects, like basic subjects like social and maths and science, it was very deep. And that actually learning all those advanced topics from the very primary, that was really impactful. It was indirectly growing our minds in that way. So I guess the old policy was good according to me, and now also the new policy totally depends on how the implementation is. On paper it looks good, it looks bad. I back up Abhishek, the bad points are more, the good points are less. But let's see how it passes in the parliament, how actually it is implemented, that will make a difference. But these are the points which I wanted to add, was that uh, the higher education, right after school education, there was a gap which was needed to be fulfilled according to me. Although we have good B schools and we also have good technical schools, but the majority of students lies not in the top tier 1 colleges, but they lie in tier 2 and tier 3 colleges. So there we needed something to make our working generation more skillful and more employable. That's it I wanted to.
All right. Thank you so much, Toshif, for sharing it. I really loved your core answer about going into IIT. Indians are intelligent, and coming out
Yes.
MIT students are intelligent. Anyway, so Vasavi, I'm sorry if I've butchered your name, but please go on.
Yeah, I don't think it was that bad. It's Vasavi, but either ways, that's fine. So I'm kind of agree with what everybody has said, and I think most of what had to be said has already been said. But I just like to add a few points. So firstly, talking about decentralization, I do think that this policy gives a certain amount of autonomy and is decentralized to a certain extent, in the sense wherein the policy is not forced upon every state. It's just like a basic guideline or an overview that every state has the option of following or not, right? So when you say that, I think Abhishek said that it's not, I mean, it's killing the decentralization. I don't think that's happening, mostly because, I mean, states still have the option of, you know, choosing not to do certain parts of the policy. For example, Tamil Nadu has refused to like take the 3 language policy, and they say they're not going to stick to it. So coming to the language part, I think the language part is quite problematic, because it's problematic not only in the implementation sense of it, but also of what kind of value addition it will create, right? So all of us, I think, mutually agree upon the fact that English is very, very important for all of us, and for higher education specifically. All of us are even having this discussion right now from different parts of the country, because all of us know this common language. If all of us had been like learning a mother tongue or a different language, it would have been very difficult for education to be kind of accessible to everyone, and for everybody to, you know, meet a different set of people. Because if you're learning only your mother tongue, your higher education also happens only in that state, because that is the language that you are more fluent in, right? And so I think it's very difficult for these students who are learning just the mother tongue to be fluent in English, and thereby have like higher education with proper English. And I think the second thing that the English language, I mean the mother tongue language, creates is a problem of implementation. In the sense, there are a few states that have many regional language in them, right? The Northeast, every tribe has their own language. So in that case, this creates a problem of implementation. Which exact language is the state supposed to choose if they have like 3 regional languages spoken in that state? So I think there's also this problem of implementation. But talking about the positives of the policy, I think it goes around to creating more holistic students and more holistic individuals, in the sense that they are teaching the students vocational studies, they're teaching them about the environment, they're teaching them about things that we personally, I don't think we were subjected to these things. And so coming back to the GD question, I think that yes, we did miss out a bit, because if we were taught the way that the plan is like laid out on paper, I think it would have created much more holistic individuals and people who care about like a variety of things, right? And are not just like nerds who are into their books all the time. So yeah, I do think that it will create more holistic students, but at the end of the day, I agree with everybody that it all depends on the implementation. There are a variety of policies that sound great on paper, but in a country like India, it's very difficult to implement anything, and it's the implementation that will lead to failure or success. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Vasavi. I again sorry if I butchered your name, but Shloka has raised their hand, so go forward. Hold on. Yeah, Shloka.
Okay, so I firstly, my name is Shlok. The A is silent, so just for not butchering in the future.
Uh,
That's
sorry.
one
Sure.
point. Secondly, just on the point of Wasabi, she said that it is decentralizing the education policy. That is very hilarious in itself, because the policy was taken upon or implemented without taking the states into consideration, right? So on one hand, you're saying we're decentralizing everything. Secondly, you're taking it on board without even considering the state. Secondly, the part of vocational courses. Now, in a country like India, right, it is very easy to say we will give vocational training, but it is very difficult to implement, and there are many reasons for it. Like in most of the cities or even villages, you have very small schools. We've been lucky to go to big schools with lots of children, but usually a school for them means one room where in different time slots students come and train, right? It is very difficult for them to teach those children vocational courses who barely have any educational background. Secondly, where do you get the teachers to teach them those vocational courses? You just go on YouTube and see the kind of teachers you have in villages or any other place. Like for you and me, vocational courses might sound fun and all, but for them it is not easy. Like they don't know ABCD properly. You see the pronunciation, or you even see how they spell cat. Sometimes you will be dumbfounded by it, right? So all these things, as Vasavi said, it is very easy to put it on paper. But when you come down to the implementation of it, it is really difficult to go forward. I think Arnab had made a point that it will be very difficult to practically put in higher education if a person drops out and people will keep dropping out. I think that's not fair because people drop out from colleges due to various reasons, right? In India, you have family problems, you have money problems. If a person is allowed to come back into the educational course without giving credits, it is a major boost for him. Instead of seeing that he's last and he's gone out, to take it as I've been given a second opportunity to start from where I left off, right? I've done 2 years. I don't want to start off again from 2 years when I've left it because I had some family problem or some monetary problem in the background. I'm getting my chance to come back and start off from where I had left off. That's a very important point to be made. Again, to come back to the GDP part of it, it is good that the GDP part of it is increased, and also the national education policy has increased the free education from first it was I think from 5 years to 18 years if I'm not mistaken. Now they've included 3 years. So pre-primary comes into the aspect of it. Plus, I think it's not mentioned in the policy yet, but I think the midday meal should be extended for the same. So I think the difference in GDP growth is due to these factors also because you have to give out a lot of social security measures as in education because of the age gap increase. Also, they've clubbed in many courses, right? Like heading bodies. Like you have different bodies, like one body for engineering, one body for maybe CA, one body for MBA. Those those bodies are now being clubbed into one major body. This can be a good move. This can be a negative move, depending again on implementation. Because when you club different bodies, each body has its own hidden agenda, right? So if those hidden agendas come on the forefront, it can create a mess within the body. Because since at least I think 33 years we've been separate bodies, so each body has its own bias towards a certain field. So clubbing them together can be a little difficult. I don't want to take much time, so I'll just end here.
All right, thank you, Shlok. I saw that Anuj raised their hand. Anuj, do you wish to speak? If you do, please raise your hand once again, or we move forward. All right, so he's not. First of all, very fruitful discussion. Just to recap, and then I think we'll open it for everybody. To recap, we talked about promoting the regional languages. It is unclear in metros what regional language it is. English, it's a common consensus that English is a key language, and the only reason we're talking to each other is due to all of us knowing English. We some people explained about the classing scheme going from a 10+2 to a different scheme. People discussed about GDP increasing and the focus on vocational training. Vocational training was a topic that Shlok discussed. It is difficult and we need fair amount of education for it in the first place. The major concern, I think, with everybody is the implementation. There are many languages in India, many languages in each state, let alone the country. And then vocational training is also a concern as expressed by many of you. Uh, Abhishek, I think, told us about the government that is realizing the education and he feels it's a good thing. The students are responsible to choose their subjects, and also we talked about the education policy being changed after 33 years. It's a long time. finally, I think we all have a major consensus that implementation is the key. We all agree that the policy is a good thing, and many of us feel that we did miss out on some things uh, in the previous education policy, and we were not a part of it. That's why. But I think with all of us believe that implementation is the key, and if implemented properly, this education policy is a good thing. But then again, it all depends on implementation. Abhishek, you have raised your hand, but I think we can open this discussion to all. So I would request you to please unmute yourself, start your videos. You can unmute yourself starting now, and come on video if you can. All right. Anybody has anything to say, anything to add?
Yeah, I think
Hey, hi,
you know,
Yeah,
people have not.
Abhishek, please.
yeah, we should go on, please.
Yeah, I think one of the major concern was about this financial autonomy and increasing financial autonomy and restricting academic autonomy and its effects of privatization. I think we cannot say nothing should be privatized, but especially education and healthcare, etc., are basic right. And once if you privatize it, or when the vast amount, the poor people cannot get the education at an affordable rate, and they will have to look for other opportunities, and here the MPhil kind of courses is given out. And if the college having a high amount of fees, then certain courses like humanities and a degree in sociology, such kind of subjects which they are not a professional subject, won't have any future. So and the main thing is, see, I can tell you with one example. Like if you have a, say, region A and region B. A region A, the government tries to provide good public health, education to the people, and in region B the government privatizes it completely. On the short term, like after 5 years, this region B, they can fund for a particular kind of institutions, and they might look very beautiful, it will glitter with many facilities. But this in region A, the government needs to improve the whole institutions, so it's not practically possible to improve everything. So people might think privatization is good, but the problem is only very few people can reap the profit of that. Only very few will get to go to such a school, while they ignore the whole institution. But on a long term, like after 30 or 40 years, with the hard work, the government might improve the basic education level of all institutions in region A, with part to that of private institutions. What those private institutions can give, in such a level the government institutions can improve. But at the same time, and on the long run, in region B, just this inequality will exist. Only very few will be able to reap the profit. This is why I think we have to give a socialist approach to the education. And I can tell that with the example of Kerala. Here, the government does that very well. They invest heavily on education and healthcare. And that's why all the people are able to get good education. Like, you should see the photos or images of government schools over here. They have improved to a very good level. So even if there is unemployability, even if there is any problem, you can migrate, you have a knowledge, you have education. So with that respect, I think education is one sector which is should not be privatized, or like an inequality should not exist there. And I think this is one major concern with this NEP, this financial autonomy and scrapping of UGC.
All right. Anuj, you have raised your hand, but I think Arnav, you can go forward first.
Yes, of course. Actually, I think we have covered almost every aspect regarding that. But I just want to highlight one more thing, that I think government is now focusing on self-assessment by the students. So the self-assessment part is a really major concern, at least for me. Sometimes even I cannot assess myself on a particular subjects or any particular topics. But if the students are trained on self-assessment and assessment by others, I think it will be fruitful for them maybe after 10 or 20 years later. at a certain point of time, you will find that you can find no one who can assess you. You are the only person for this assessment. So that basic knowledge, basic infrastructure at least is required for them, because I can understand if I cannot assess myself even at this age of 23 or 24, so how can the other student can do that? So it is really a major step, I think so, for me. And one more thing, I just want to add, I am not sure whether Sanskrit is a good way to learn this subject or not, but I have gone through some articles where some scientists have mentioned that for AI and programming language development, Sanskrit can play a major role. I am not sure, but Sanskrit can play. It has, I think, any potential for that. So if government can build any infrastructure on that, only then I think they should superimpose that subject. Otherwise, they cannot. They should not. That's it.
All right, thank you so much. Anuj, if you have anything to add to that, or if you want to,
Yeah.
yeah, go on.
So one thing I might not have read very carefully, but I do not understand why this reason that it will education will be privatized once this NEP comes into the picture. I don't know why are you thinking that. So this is something you can help me with. Second, Arnab rightly mentioned that even at this age we are not able to self-assess. That is because of a flawed education system where we were spoon-feeded everything throughout this time. And at this juncture, when we really need to self-assess ourselves, we are unable to do so. So having to do it by ourselves at a young stage would help us to grow properly. Another thing about what Toshif mentioned, what he read, how it is different from IIT and MIT. What I think is it's not the educational institute that is when you are entering into say an IIT, you have cleared an exam. So everyone who is present beside you is more or less of the same caliber, right? But when you get out of the institute, there are certain disparities. Like one is able to do so great, one is not able to do so great. I don't think it's because of the institution that you are not able to do so. It was because of a basic training. Because we are in a rat race right now. Everyone is just taking PCM, going for engineering, giving a JE, trying to enter into IT. Not like and now and it is why engineering when we did, why to wait till that point of time? Rather, at a very early stage, like whatever the system has been proposed right now, if you learn at that very stage what you wish to do, then you can just pick that particular field and not waste your entire time. This is one thing, and another thing which I'm not really very sure what is the point. Like when if you go into an undergraduate degree, complete 1 year, you get a basic certificate. 2 years you get a diploma, and if you complete the all the years you get the degree. The thing is, once you take that diploma or basic certificate and go into the corporate world, nobody is going to accept you. Like say if I completed this degree and if I am a person who has just got a diploma, I would always prefer that person who has a degree, which is the same case right now. Nobody would take a dropout instead of a graduate. So it's just for the student himself feel very demotivated that I wasted 2 years of my life for nothing. I think this is my point of view on that particular thing of the basic certificate, diploma, and degree. And the only thing is the privatization part that I do not understand. If because what I feel like, as Shuk mentioned, there are several schools where very basic amenities are not present, and we cannot even think about vocational training over there. So that is the goal. Uh, there they won't go with vocational training. There first they will improve the quality of education, which is mandatory, very basic in nature. Why to think about vocational training in that particular sector? We think of the vocational training where the bases are already cleared, where you are in a position to learn the vocational training. And I think, yeah, that's all from my side. Just the privatization part, if I can understand well, I might be able to grasp the complete picture properly.
No,
All
can I
right.
just to
Wait, wait.
clarify that?
Yeah. So, Anuj, to your point, I think Toshev has posted something in the chat. You should take a look at it. Abhishek, if you want to say something, or Toshev, if you want to counter, please do so. Thanks.
No,
And
this
sorry
is
for interrupting.
just to clarify that thing, that dismantling the autonomous funding agency and regulatory body UGC, that is University Grants Commission, and replacing it with central government controlled HEGC, that is Higher Education Grants Commission, and HEFA, HEFA, that is Higher Education Finance Agency. That is the thing that is threatening the public character of the university. So what it is going to happen is that rather than grants or public funds, these finance agencies will provide loans to the universities, which will have to be repaid. So that's why I said it's the higher education sector, the financial autonomy and all, it is going to get privatized. So how will they pay back the loans? They will have to either tie up with a bank or with some other places. So this dismantling of UGC, and that's the reason I said it will go to privatization.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
I
the answer, just
sorry.
let me
Yeah,
say,
Toshev, please.
the answer IIT and MIT answer which I was talking about, the answer was based on the IQ level of the students. So some of the students, their IQ level was tested, which are going into the IIT and which are coming out of the IIT. So based on that study, that answer was based. And my main point there to prove was that, like in school, we are not that exposed to the online teaching or other teaching, or like we are not self-studying much to that extent which we do in higher education. So that school plays a very important role for our education till the primary or till our undergraduation. So the school which we all are studied, they are making us enough capable, and our IQ level is really good that we are able to crack IIT. And after going into the undergraduate or IIT, it's totally upon us. We are the ones to decide our fate. The college is just helping us. There's this common scenario that whatever we are, we have to develop ourselves. We have to develop our skills. So even after that much of freedom, after that much of exposure, we are not doing it ourselves. So there must be something lacking in Indian systems, which is not lacking in MIT. So MIT graduates who come out of MIT are having more IQ than the IITians coming out. So that was the point which I was pointing out there. That's it.
All right. Thank you so much. Anuj, if you want to say something, or anybody wants to say something,
Shlok
please.
was putting some point. He can go ahead.
I have unfortunately muted all of you. You can't unmute yourself. So please raise your hand if you want to counter or yeah. Wait. So Shlok wants to say something. Arnav, I think you can talk after him. So Shlok, please go forward.
I just had one point to make on the point Arnav made about self-assessment, right? You are saying you cannot self-assess yourself as an individual. How do you ever expect the government to assess you and make a decision for you, right? If I'm able to assess, if I make a decision for myself, I can live with a decision. Most of the student suicides which happen are because they're forced into something, or those kind of reasons. If I make a decision for myself and I choose this path later in life, I can say that this was my decision. I cannot blame it on the government. What the government is doing is removing their decision making power and giving it into your hands. You need to be able to assess yourself from a very early age, and this is very clear in the American or UK education system also. You have to take onus for yourself. No one else is going to be coming to spoon feed you. We have not been able to self-assess ourselves yet because we've never been given the opportunity. But the future generation needs to be given that opportunity, because you are the only one who can assess yourself and not the government. That's the very basic thing. I just want to make a point which Arnab was saying, that I cannot assess myself. You need to learn to assess yourself. If you're going to a job also, you're assessing other people. If you can't assess yourself, don't think that you can assess other people, and learn to introspect and then go ahead with it.
All right. Arnav, please go forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hi Slok. Uh, Actually, I didn't mention that that self-assessment part is not required. I just emphasize it is required for a student who is in class 6 or 7 or in class 8. Yes, for me, I cannot self-assess myself properly because it is for my own lacking. So I don't want the future generation, the future students to face similar kind of difficulties. So I totally agree with the self-assessment part, and it is required. So I know the government is not going to assess me for the entire for the rest of my life, and this kind of assessment is not useful that much also. So that is why I have asked to stick on that self-assessment part for a student who is in class 5 or 6 or 7. And one more thing regarding that multiple entry exit, I think Anuj has pointed out that point. Anuj, you can find that in rural India, there is a common practice that students are forced to drop out because of their family condition. So I don't think there is nothing wrong if they can complete either 1 year or 2 years. Then he can support his family, and after 2 or 3 or 5 years, he can pursue his course, not from the scratch. From that point, he left that education. So I think it is a good point because of that academic bank of credit. So if someone is forced to drop out and he can continue his education after a prolonged gap, yes, I can understand there is a mental stigma. People do not consider who has a gap for a very long time, but I think in near future or maybe 1 or 2 decades, this stigma will be diminished. People will consider that right talent. So that's it.
All right. If anybody wants to say anything else, please once again raise your hands. If not, we will end here. I'll give you, say, 10 seconds to raise your hand. And please don't leave the meeting right now.